Hey guys, how are you? I hope you're all doing very well. This afternoon I have yet another movie review, so I hope you find this one interesting. This is a horror film, a science fiction horror film from the United States, English language, released in the year 2015, directed by Matt Osterman, and this movie is called 400 Days. So 400 Days is about these 4 astronauts who have high ambitions in their lives. They basically want to go on a deep space mission in the near future, but before they do that they have to pass a selection process. So this selection process consists of a 400-day simulation. So they're going to be underground in this bunker that is emulating a ship. They're going to have all of the basically the problems that they're going to face in deep space thrown at them, and how they cope with these problems and how they work as a team is going to determine whether or not they are able. So the authorities are judging them for every move they make, and the only contact they're going to have with the outside world is mission control. So as the days go by, they see these challenges coming at them. They have to think on their feet very fast. They tend to be getting a handle on things. They're working well as a team, but then all of a sudden they are cut off from mission control. So they think that this is just a simulation, this is just a test, and that they're still being assessed. But as each day goes by, and the longer and longer they're there, some very strange things start happening, which ultimately makes them believe that maybe their life is in danger and that something is wrong. But then they're always torn between whether or not this is a simulation, this is a test, or in fact they are onto something. So whether or not it is reality, that's something you're going to have to find out for yourself, because that's as far as I'm going with my synopsis. Now my thoughts on 400 Days. I didn't really know what to expect with this one. Actually, I was expecting to hate the film because no one ever talks about it, and usually when a film is not really heard of, it's not heard of for a reason, and that is because it's not very good. So I went in there with very limited expectations, and although the movie does have its problems, more than one problem, I still thought it was a lot better than I expected. I actually enjoyed this film. I'm not going to say it's a very good film, but it's definitely a movie I'd recommend to anyone out there who is a fan of deep space films such as Apollo 18, Europa Report, Last Days on Mars, and even to some extent The Martian. Basically movies that take place in a very isolated atmosphere, that if something goes wrong, no one is there to help them. So it's a movie about teamwork, and it's a movie about adjusting to very foreign conditions, and that's something that's very uncomfortable. If you're on the I think the reason why these outer space sort of horror films work is that it's on a foreign terrain, that we've never been there, that the possibilities are endless, and it's that age-old question, are we alone? And so that's why I think space films really work, and for me anyway, it's just that level of dread, the level of panic and the level of suspense on a land that you have no idea, you're not accustomed to this. So I think the setting is very good when it's done right. So coming into this film I was sceptical, knowing that this movie doesn't actually take place in outer space, but I still thought it captured the atmosphere very well. These astronauts are cut off from the rest of the world. They're in this very secluded environment, and when the bad things start to happen they work as a team, but then it's that not knowing whether or not this is a simulation or reality that really works for it, because it keeps a very unpredictable nature. You don't know what's going on. You know that the director has an idea, but he doesn't really let it known, and as the movie gets weirder and weirder, you're trying to determine whether or not these people are going insane, and it actually feels like it's an insane sort of environment. So the fact that it is unpredictable is the reason why it's so intriguing, is that these astronauts, are they being tested? And then when the movie gets really weird, it starts to go down a Terry Gilliam kind of way. It just takes you off guard, and I think that was the biggest plus in the film, and that's the reason why I would recommend this movie to anyone out there who likes your surreal sort of horror films. So I thought the atmosphere inside the bunker was very good. As I said, they've got this situation that emulates deep space, and after a while you forget that it's actually taken in an underground bunker. You can kind of suggest that it is from outer space. It's because it's got that certain level of isolation, that level of panic, and a level of deep psychology. I thought this is a very psychological horror film, and for the first, say, 3/4, I thought it was very intriguing, it was very captivating, and I just wanted to know more. Even though I could see the shortcomings in the film, I could overlook those shortcomings because ultimately the situation is what keeps it afloat. So I really liked the cinematography, and I really liked the direction where it went, where it felt like it was a little bit out of control. So unfortunately, that out of control feeling that you also have the feeling that this movie wasn't controlled very well, that it wanted to splash really bizarre things, but it didn't really keep reins on that. It felt like it was a little bit of a mess. So you're kind of asking yourself questions, and those questions really aren't answered to a very satisfying level, in that you kind of think to yourself, well, what was the point of this, what was the point of that? And you come to the conclusion that it was just there to take the audience off guard, to basically tug the rug from under them, and disorientate them and get the feeling that they have for the astronauts, but you feel that, okay, it is a little bit messy, it should have been polished and executed a little bit better than it was. I didn't like the overall story of these astronauts. I thought they were likeable enough, but there is a lot of irrelevant material. There are side plots that don't really have any momentum. They don't really feel like they're relevant, and you kind of feel that the director is trying to get you some insight into these lives that are not very interesting. So ultimately the movie is about a situation, and the situation is bigger than these characters, but when the situation takes a back seat in some instances for these subplots, you feel that it's halted. It's just stopped for a little bit and then it keeps going, and then it stops and it goes. So it's a very disjointed sort of experience that you have, and I know a lot of people are going to be disappointed by it. I don't know why characters in horror movies need side stories all the time, especially when they're not relevant to the overall situation. They don't really bring anything to kind of build on that solid sort of foundation that the film had. I didn't like the overall time period. Now this is over 400 days, but you don't feel like you're absorbed into their exhaustion, their mental exhaustion. You don't feel like they've been away for that long because it cuts through a lot of days. So for example, day 1 to day 70, day 70 to day 145, and it just does that, and you feel that the movie wants to tell you that they've been there for a long time, but because it doesn't have the patience to build up that sense of boredom, you don't feel it. So you can't really get in the minds of these astronauts as well as you probably should have. This movie should have been a lot longer for what it wanted to do, and what it wanted to do was just show you the isolation and the fact that, you know, they've been so long without contact from the outside world, but you just don't feel that. So that was another shortcoming that I had with the film. And another shortcoming is also a positive. It is a very ambiguous ending. There are a lot of questions that you have to make your own interpretations up, but those questions really don't make sense, and I thought that it was left up to interpretation from laziness, because I thought that it would have been just as good if the director tied up loose ends. But because I said earlier that it feels like the director doesn't have much control of this film, it felt like he was just leaving up to interpretation for the simple fact that he didn't know really what to do with it. So the ambiguity in the ending, it does work to some level, but then you kind of think to yourself, well, it's a little bit stupid. That it felt like a little bit of a cop-out, but once again, maybe it is down to the fact that the director was a little bit too ambitious and he couldn't tie those ambitions up to make it a rewarding experience. So unfortunately, this movie has its problems. It does prevent it from being a good film, but it's still very interesting. It's a different take on deep space horror films, so if you're a fan of this subgenre, I would recommend it, but you're not going to be wanting to go and see it again. Now, I've seen it once and I'll probably never see this again. I don't have any real need to see it again, because with good ambiguous endings, it makes you want to go back and piece together everything, but it doesn't really do that in this regard. So it feels like a little bit sloppy. It should have been executed better, but having said that, it is certainly not the worst film. So overall, for 400 days, I'm going to give it 2.5 stars. It's very interesting, so for that, I would say at least go and see it once. Alright guys, that's my review. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching movies, and I'll see you later.